Great. Thanks, Ronnie. It was nice to have a perspective from an investor of what is needed or required from your perspective as it relates to the field of what we're doing. Let's see. Here's my clicker. So now I'm going to talk to you about a couple of things that the foundation is doing internally to help programs the foundation has developed internally to help our community in the commercialization space. The first program I'm going to talk to you about is our FUS Partners program. And I apologize to those folks who were at the breakfast yesterday morning. A lot of this is going to be repetitive in nature, and it's going to be just a summary of that. So the FUS Partners program, what is it? Basically, it's a formalization of what we've been doing ad hoc for a long, long time. We just wanted to put a framework around it and actually call attention to the fact that this is something that we do for the community. The overarching goals of the FUS Partner Program, this was taken from the page on the website, but the basic goal is our mission is to accelerate the timeline of this technology, to get this technology to patients. That's our mission. We have raised over $100 million since inception, and most of that money has gone to date into the research community. But if we don't do anything on the commercialization aspect, that $100 million, will wither and die, and it won't ever reach the patient. So we see the foundation as having a very we see the foundation as having a very necessary role in this space. And so what we've been doing is sort of sitting down and talking about how we can use our brand and our reputation, the fact that we're an independent, unbiased third party, and our network and community based on all of our stakeholder relationships across the entire field to leverage what we have to try and help the commercialization space. And so what we do, just sort of in summary, is I talk to the manufacturers. I'm one of the main points of contact for the manufacturers. In general, I'm on the phone with these folks all of the time, but one of the things that I've sort of formalized is trying to reach out and, rather than on an ad hoc basis, talk to them, but try and talk to them on a more structured basis and with a more structured agenda to know where they are in particular, where their pinch points are, and what I can do to try and help direct them either to collaborations with other folks within the field or even internally to other programs that other members of the foundation are working on. Additionally, we've been proactively reaching out to the incumbent investors and also other investors in the medtech space to find out what, if they're interested in, for the incumbent investors, if they are interested in further investment in the space, if they still have funds to deploy, if they still have appetite for it. Or for new investors, we send them a copy of the State of the Field and ask them if they would be interested in having a conversation just about the technology in general, not any particular company. And if they are interested in those conversations, then the next step is to ask them, what is it that they like to invest in? Are there particular indications? Are there particular stages of company? How do they like to deploy their money? This is a global technology. Are there restrictions geographic? And then from there, based on what we know of the companies and what we know of the investors, we can try and do some matchmaking to try and create some efficiency so that we are introducing investors to companies that are appropriate for what they are, and or suggesting to companies investors that are appropriate, just to try and create a little efficiency and hopefully drive that investment a little bit quicker. Additionally, lately I've been doing a lot of connecting between manufacturers and other manufacturers. A lot of this has been related of late to different geographic regions. As we've talked about and has been discussed in the past couple of days, there have been some changes in the CE mark regulatory space, and so a lot of the companies have changed their business plans and are shifting their timing for when they're coming to the US, and so they are looking for support and or just to be able to have conversations about what's going on at the FDA and how to work with the FDA. Additionally, folks in Asia are interested in coming to the United States or vice versa. And so if there are ways that we can create strategic partnerships between our manufacturers, it's just another way that we can hopefully accelerate the development of the technology. Additionally, this is something we've been doing for a long time on an ad hoc basis, is connecting companies with academic research laboratories and vice versa. Actually, we've been doing quite a bit of that this week while I've been here at the conference, meeting with some of these companies and talking to them about their pinch points. Sometimes they're stuck in R&D, and there's a particular pitch point, and I can direct them to an expert in the field. Folks are looking for, sometimes European-based companies are looking for folks in the United States to help them with their preclinical work to take to the FDA, et cetera. And then lastly, we help with due diligence. And so when companies are talking with investors that are new to the space, we always offer the service of being able to talk to any investor about the field as a whole, not in that particular, and it doesn't have to be related to that particular company. We're happy to tell or talk about what the unique niche is of that company, but we're just happy to talk about the field and what we're doing within the field. I know that reimbursement is an issue, and so I think our ability to serve in the due diligence aspect of the process to see, even though there isn't reimbursement, let us tell you about all of the activity that is taking place and all of the partnerships that we are putting in place to try and drive that path forward, I think is reassuring to some of the investment community. So how do companies participate? There's no formal opt-in or opt-out. It's all you have to do is just call us and ask for help, and we're more than willing to listen to what you have to say and hear what your pinch points are and help where we can. We don't receive any compensation for these services. A lot of what we do as it relates to investor and companies is very similar to what an investment banker would do, but we don't ask for fees or otherwise receive any compensation. What we will do, we are a nonprofit, we do have to raise money, is that if there is a successful transaction, we will ask both parties for a donation, and we hope that both parties actually see that the donation to the foundation is a way to grow the field and to de-risk their investment. And so I'm the managing director for the program. I'm responsible for the day-to-day operations of the program, and I'm the primary point of contact. But I couldn't do this without the oversight committee of our board of directors. They are great resources for me and are always willing to take any questions or concerns I have, or to help do introductions as it relates to the activities of the program. And then, yeah. Okay, can we switch to I'm going to put on my other hat now, and we're going to switch my slides, and we're going to talk about open science. So as the director of operations at the foundation, I have the distinct pleasure of being able to take a lot of Neil's ideas and figure out how to logistically implement them. And open science is one of those things that falls into that category. And so I think most people in this room understand what the concept of open science is. You know, it's been around for quite a few years, but the part that I want to draw your attention to is the last sentence in this definition from Wikipedia that's in italics, saying, generally making it easier to publish and communicate scientific knowledge. And any mandate or any recommendation that we have, we don't want to burden our community with if we are not working towards that goal of trying to, right, so the amount of effort that you have to put in to the open science requirements, the benefit needs to exceed the burden. And so 2 years ago, if you guys remember, we had a speaker from the NIH, Phil Bourne, who was the first associate director for data science, and he gave a really compelling talk on open science. And after that talk, we reached out to him and had asked if he would come down from Washington, D.C. and spend a few hours with the scientific team to talk about how we as a funding organization could try and implement some of the topics that he talked about during his speech at the symposium last time, to the benefit of our community. So he came down and spoke with us, and it was during that conversation that he disclosed that he was actually leaving the NIH at the end of the year and would be joining the University of Virginia as the director of the Data Science Institute. So he was literally going to be right down the street from us, which was very fortuitous and was great in that we were allowed to not only have the opportunity to spend an afternoon with him, but then Jessica and I were able to go and talk to him a couple of times afterwards as we were bouncing ideas of what we wanted to maybe try and do as far as implementing an open science policy at the foundation. So Phil's advice to the foundation was, it's always better to lead with a carrot, not with a stick. He told us to go out and have a lot of conversations with others in the field to figure out what they're doing, and lots of, since it was a sort of a new emerging concept, at least for the life sciences community, to learn from their mistakes and then to start small and build on successes as opposed to rolling out a fully fleshed out open science policy. And so that's what we did. So in the last 2 years, quite a few members of the scientific team have gone to various conferences and or initiated one-on-one conversations with the list that you see here, other health funding organizations or other folks who have a stakeholder in this area. And so as a result of all of those conversations, we decided to move forward with a couple of initial proposals or initial I don't know, I would say policy or just recommendations. And so our first effort was on open access publishing. So our contract templates now recommend and encourage researchers to publish their focused ultrasound funded research in an open access journal. And the foundation is willing to reimburse additional direct costs up to $2,000 if there is an option, open access option on a particular journal. The second effort relates to preprints. 2 years ago, the preprint space is very different than it is today. And we're going to I'm going to sort of skip over some of this for the sake of time, because we're going to be doing a webinar on the preprint server, and there's a backstory to how the foundation came to have their own preprint server, but it wouldn't be possible with another person who's just down the organization that's literally just down the street from us, and that is the Center for Open Science. We are so lucky to have Brian Nosek as living in our community, both between Phil Bourne and Brian Nosek. Those two are probably the leaders in the national discussion on open science. And so to literally be standing in the pickup line at my child's elementary school and be able to talk with some of the folks from the Center for Open Science just as a casual conversation has been great, and has allowed the foundation to have access to some conversations that we probably wouldn't have if they weren't just right down the street. So here's just a copy of a screenshot of the homepage for the FOCUS archive. Again, it's our preprint server. And hopefully in the first quarter of 2019, we're going to be doing a webinar to explain how to use the preprint server. And I'll talk about this share platform in that webinar as well. And so here we go. Yeah, so talking about the webinar, how to use the archive, what else I think the community needs to know about preprint servers in general, and then when we were putting together in conjunction with the Center for Open Science the preprint server, they were asking us all sorts of technical questions about copyright and licensing, to which most of the scientific team at the foundation were scratching our heads and saying, you're going to have to explain this to us because we're not quite sure. So we felt that if the scientific team had questions about it, it's something that we thought the research community would have questions about as well. And so we're going to ask that the Center for Open Science do an overview of that. And our last effort is something that we're going to roll out in 2019. I was hoping that would be something that we'd be able to do sooner. This past spring, we attended the Health Research Alliance meeting in Chicago, and after that meeting, they did a 2-day session on data sharing. And I walked away from that meeting realizing that I didn't know how much I didn't know about data sharing, and that data sharing actually is quite different than just data copying and putting somewhere. And so in order to actually truly do data sharing, it needs to be discoverable, it needs to be mineable, it needs to be something that needs to be thought about early on in the process. This is especially important if you're dealing with human subjects, because it influences how you potentially consent your patients. And so this is something that when the foundation thinks about this and tries to determine what data commons might be appropriate for us. We fund the entire spectrum of discovery across, I think now, all body systems. So there is not going to be one data commons that is going to be appropriate for us. There may be several data commons that are appropriate for us. And so what we want to be able to do is to talk with researchers early on about where potential data sharing might be appropriate, and those discussions have already started happening in some of our contracting process right now as it relates to immuno-oncology, and that's just as a result of our collaborations with CRI and the Parker Institute. Just because they have those resources, and it's just a matter of us sharing with that, sharing those data with them, and we don't have to create anything from scratch. So I just want to just do a quick overview on just our position in general. Open science is something that we believe in. We think it strongly aligns with our mission, and we believe it's in the best interest of the field. And so our promise to you as a community is that we will try to implement open science over the next few years, and we will lead with a carrot instead of a stick. We will announce any changes to contracts or the way we're going to fund early through our newsletter or through other communication channels. We commit to educating you about whatever changes we're making and why we're making them and what you need to know to be informed and make good decisions about those changes. And then lastly, as a funder, we won't put out any new mandate that doesn't also come with it some type of funding. Just as it relates to just data sharing, that may involve a bioinformatics team, and if we're going to fund that, we've got to be able to understand what's an appropriate budget, how to figure that out, and so we've got some homework to do on that. Okay, and now we are finally down to our last panel. It's our crystal ball, and Neil's going to come up and we're going to do some predictions for the next 10 years in focused ultrasound.